BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. Welcome to Believe in Celtics, brought to you by Bet Online. I am Warren Shaw. He is the great Gary Washburn, and we are your host and resource for everything Celtics this past season, as the Boston Celtics are no longer still playing in the NBA playoffs, losing in the Eastern Conference Finals in 7 games to the Miami Heat. Gary, it's been a minute. You've been on a whirlwind tour covering the Celtics roster over the course of the final 2 rounds here. Obviously, I have a lot to get into, but first and foremost, my guy, I got to ask how you're doing.
Oh, everything's good. Everything's good. Tough end to the season for Celtic fans. I know they had high hopes for winning a championship, and the path seemed to be there for them to do that. But it just wasn't meant to be, and there's a lot of issues this team has to address. And quite honestly, they just weren't good enough at the key moments, the pivotal moments. And, the one thing about, and as you know, Warren, about the Miami Heat is they expose your weaknesses. They show you, they hand you a mirror and show you all the little, you think you're feeling good about yourself and you're looking good. And they're the ones that, show you a mirror and go, well, your mustache isn't quite, trimmed to, this is a little uneven here. And, your eyes are a little bit bad. You could have got some more sleep here. And, that shirt doesn't quite match those pants. Like they point out all your little crevices and issues and they point them out. And then on the biggest stage, a team like the Celtics that thought that they were not flawless, but as close to championship ready as anyone, ended up not being that way because the Heat, put them on blast with some things that has been issues. And you followed this team, Warren, as close as anybody all season.
Yeah.
And you knew they're going to get burned. They're going to get burned. It might not be, with some of the inferior opponents. It wasn't the Hawks. It barely wasn't the Sixers, but the Heat, which do superior scouting reports. They know your weaknesses, expose them, and now they kind of got to start all over and do a whole new unfinished business 2023-24.
Don't do them like that, G. Don't do them like
that.
Yeah. Man, that was something else for sure. Well, we're going to dive right into the conversation of the Eastern Conference Finals here on Believe in Celtics. And then obviously in the break, we will kind of talk about the summer ahead. First, we got to, make sure you give us a 5-star rating on whatever your podcast platform is. Make sure you give Gary a follow at G Washburn Globe on Twitter. You can give me a follow at Shaw Sports NBA. Make sure you follow Believe Network and at Believe Sports as well. So as you were touching in here too about the Miami Heat being, the unhappy mirror that the Celtics had to look into. As we talk about this on our show all the time, obviously I live in the South Florida area, and all they can talk about, all Miami fans can talk about, was like how much they would have boat raced this team if Tyler Hero was available, and the Heat were actually healthy, how much worse it could have been for Boston. C'est la vie, none of that even matters. At the end of the day, the Heat got it done and the Celtics didn't. Game 7, you were there. I want to kind of get into the overall feeling because it seemed like the crowd was ready to explode, and obviously Tatum turns his ankle in the very first play of the game. I want to ask how much you feel that was a determining factor for the Game 7 outcome specifically. But I just got to say this, for Celtic fans that are out there, they shouldn't have even been in Game 7. Game 6 was a miracle. They collapsed. They literally collapsed at the end of that game and gave Jimmy Butler 3 free throws after collapsing, in the meetings proceeding to that, and get a miracle tip by Derek White to, in essence, save their season to force a Game 7. But they shouldn't have even been there to begin with, to be honest. So I had to kind of get that out. But I wanted to ask you, how much do you think Tatum's turned ankle dictated the outcome of Game 7, or were we always fated to kind of be this way?
Yeah, Warren, I don't know if people knew how bad it was until like the forthcoming like next several minutes. Remember, he hit a free throw off that foul by Gabe Vincent, and he didn't score for the rest of the first quarter. I think they brought him out at the 6-minute mark. So midway through second quarter, he had 1 point. And then people were like, wow, he's not moving well. And I think I tweeted that out, like, he doesn't look himself. So I think that's when the fans started to realize Tatum's not right. He doesn't have that burst, that explosion. He is out there laboring. But I also think, you know what, Warren, they lost this game in the first 6 minutes. They had Miami down 9-4. And I want to say 2 to 3 chances to increase the lead to 12-4. Remember, Game 5, they jumped on Miami 20-5.
Yeah.
When Miami, they played even from that. The Celtics won the game by 13 points, and there was some garbage time hoops and all that. But Miami got punched in the face. They came back, but they could never overcome that double-digit deficit. The Celtics ended up looking convincing, winning pretty convincingly. But the key was jumping out 20-5. In this game, Miami, I think, started 2 for 11. And I think the Celtics had a chance to get that crowd really into it, 17-4, 20-4. You have to be sharp every game. And when your offense, what were they? Okay, so they were 9 for 42 in Game 7, and 7 for 35 in Game 6. So that's 13, my math right, my Los Angeles public school math. That was 16 for 77. Okay? That's what got them. Like, you were right. Like, they were lucky to win Game 6, but they were also good from the 2-point line. They attacked the rim. They got some easy hoops. They got some dunks. They were slicing and dicing Miami in the paint. They dominated the paint. So that's how you win games. Warren, if the 3 isn't going down, you go to the 2. Okay, so they took 35. So that's not a lot for Joe Mazzulla. He wants them to take 45 to 50 damn near. So for him, that was like, well, we won, but we didn't take enough threes. So they took 7 more threes in Game 7, but they didn't establish nothing in the paint, and they lost. They scored 84 points in the biggest game of the season. Just a real crushing disappointment for this franchise, for a franchise that feels like they were ready. They were all set up. They felt like they matched up pretty well with Denver. I think it would have been a pretty good series. I would probably give Denver the favor because I think Denver is a focused ball club right now. And they let themselves, like Jaylen said, they let the city down. Like there was a collective, like, what the hell just happened here? And you watched the Miami Heat celebrate on your floor, just like you did the Golden State Warriors the year before, and the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2018. You go 5-6 at home in the playoffs. You lose 3 home games in the series. Like Miami came and won 3 times at the Garden. The Celtics won twice in Miami. If you win 1 more game at home, you win the series. So you're not protecting home court. That's something. I don't know how they improve that, but the whole like we're a better road team, that shouldn't be the case. And that's good to be a good road team, but you don't want to be a better road team than better at home. And the offense was inept. And Miami's role players and what they did, they all played their roles. Jimmy was good that night after really being terrible until the final 4 minutes of Game 6. Bam Adebayo was sharp. Caleb Martin was unconscious again. Like I thought I voted him MVP of the series. I thought he bailed them out of Game 2 when they were about to get buried early in Game 2 in the second quarter when the Celtics were up, I think, 42-29. And Miami went on I want to say a 15-0. Miami went on a 19-0 run just like the Celtics did in that game, and that was sparked by Caleb Martin. And every time Caleb Martin was open, he was draining them. He outplayed Tatum and Brown in that series. And I just think all their guys, Duncan Robinson, who you lived down there, was virtually he was banished to the bench until Tyler Hero got hurt, and he comes off the bench and scores 10 points, but 18 in a couple of games. So the Celtics got some problems, and we can talk about those, some issues to address. Not major issues. Okay, they're not there when FanDuel and all those folks release their odds when this series is over, the finals. The Celtics will be favored, or if not behind Denver, to win it all again. They'll be in the top 3 teams to get to the finals, to win the championship. They'll be a betting favorite. I'm sure if the Nuggets win, I'm sure they'll be favorite. Then maybe the Celtics, but they have some issues to shore up if they don't want to repeat this, getting to the Eastern Conference Finals and losing in 7 games.
Before we close out this finals conversation here, Gary, Eastern Conference Finals conversation, I want to give you credit for, I heard you in the post-game pressers, right? And you were pressing Mazzulla. I didn't even say pressing. You were asking journalistic questions. And, I think there were times his demeanor in those things can be a little bit off-putting if you are a journalist or a fan of the team. You're just kind of like, why is it so dry? Why is there not like an overall sense of urgency to that aspect? We're going to talk about Joe coaching, et cetera, in the next segment, kind of more in depthly. But quickly, your overview of his adjustments in the conference finals, specifically, obviously being down 0-3, getting back into the series. So he's got to get credit to some degree for that as well, too. But what was your overall impressions of him in his first conference finals, kind of keeping it specific to that?
I thought I'd give him a C. Spoelstra was coaching circles around him. It just seemed like, Warren, they didn't prepare for Miami. They just didn't have a definitive set game plan. They just thought we can be ourselves and we're going to beat this team. And Miami came out in game 1 at 46. And I just think they said that whole 46-point third quarter changed the entire series. I think the Celtics were up 7 in the first half. It looked like in the first half they came out like we're the better team. You ain't gonna Milwaukee us, right? You're not gonna do that. This is our series. And then that 46-point third quarter, I think, changed the entire series because the Celtics were never the same team after that. They were always chasing from behind. They were on edge in game 2. And I just think the lack of adjustments, the inability to deal with the zone defense, his crazy rotations, Grant in here 1 minute. I thought they just, not using Sam Hauser. I felt Sam Hauser was a guy that, and you were around last year, Warren, he was on the roster, but he wasn't ready. And this year, Gallinari goes down in August, tears his ACL in the Euro Cup. So the guy that they got to stretch the floor and hit some threes and to be that guy, that difference maker, is gone. Brad Stevens told us Sam Hauser can fill that role. He's 6'8". He can stretch the floor. Sam Hauser played 80 games during the regular season, and he shot 42% from 3. That's pretty good, right? Hey, that's not Steph Curry, but damn, anything in the 40s is outstanding. And he didn't play him in the playoffs. He didn't play him in his series, but Miami somehow found a role for Duncan Robinson because he is a threat, as we saw, and he's a threat for backdoor plays. Why couldn't you do that with Hauser? Where's your creativity with your lineups? Where is Peyton Pritchard? Where's the guys, if you need some muscle, some fouls, where's Blake Griffin? I'm not talking about Blake Griffin 30 minutes, but you saw Spoelstra throughout the series. Okay, Kevin Love, this ain't you. We're going to put you to the bench. Start Caleb Martin. Okay, Cody Zeller, your minutes were terrible. You're not playing in game 7 and in game 6. After games, there were so many adjustments that Spoelstra made. And I just didn't see the same from Mazzulla. It was, let's rely on our talent. Where's the game plan? And I get it. If you move the ball and you hit threes, you're going to win. But what about when you don't hit threes? And I just felt like there wasn't a lot of adjustments made. And I think they won. And Jayson Tatum's told me something very interesting. Like they played relaxed after they fell behind 3-0 with nothing to lose. That's why they were successful. And they won game 4 and then won game 5 because they were supposed to lose this series after that. And then game 6, they dominated until the last 4 minutes and then almost blew it. But I didn't see the major adjustments. I saw Spoelstra moving his chess pieces. Okay, let me try that. Oh, let me try that. Let me try that. Let me throw that at him. Let me throw that wrinkle. You knew in game 7 he was going to have something different. And what they do, I think they switched more than half the pick and rolls that they had not done all series. I think they had switched something like, I read 30%, 25% of the pick and rolls during the first 6 games, and they switched 50. I want to say 50% in game 7.
Yeah.
Spoelstra adjustment.
Let me ask you this one.
So that's like, that was a difference. Mazzulla was in some cases sleepwalking, and maybe it's his arrogance, his stubbornness, but it wasn't like he was trying a lot of stuff and it failed. I didn't see that. I saw him say, we're good enough to beat you guys as we are, and they weren't. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I'm going to ask this last thing because I obviously we're on a little bit of a tangent here, but there's a lot to dive into, and obviously we haven't had a conversation in a minute. But I thought he said something at the end of the press conference in game 7, and I don't remember who asked it, maybe John Corrales or something like that. Somebody had asked him about Tatum and the game plan. After Tatum hurt his ankle, did the game plan change? And flat out said no, just play through it. And to me, in a lot of ways, that's almost malpractice. Why do you continue to have him in the same spots, in some ways trying to create on a bum ankle? Why can't he operate from the nail? Why can't he operate even a little bit from the post? I'm not saying Tatum is a back to the basket type player. That's not it at all. But give Miami some different looks, take some pressure off of Tatum, in essence, in a way to try to manufacture offense in a way that you haven't been able to do it. And we need to talk about Jaylen Brown and the 8 turnovers and all of that. And we'll get into that, obviously, in the next segment. But some of that stuff to me is where you're just like, all right, when after games, 4 and 5, where we thought we might have been seeing a little bit of growth and even parts of game 6, how do you just revert and reverse skate? And it's almost exactly what you said, when now that they came all the way back, and in some ways the pressure was back on them being the home team, they just couldn't. And he himself, as a leader of the organization on the coaching sidelines, also shrunk in that moment. And I think it's hard as a first-year coach. He can obviously get better, but I think that's where some of the things that were really frustrating to witness, even as a basketball fan, it's just like, do something. You know what that mean was like, you can do something. It's just the same situation over and over again.
Totally. Like you said, and it's that defiance. And I said, I like Joe. I'll say this, like, people think we don't get along or Joe hates you, doesn't he? He does not hate me. And we've talked off the record. We've had conversations. We're fine. Yeah. He's like, you got a job to do, and my job is to protect my players. I respect him, have full respect for him. But I do sense like a sense of defiance and stubbornness that I don't think serves him well. Because you guys failed. Al Horford said it was a failure.
Yep.
He said it was a failure. Like, and we can, much respect to the comments Giannis made after losing to Miami, that it wasn't a failure, it's experience. And I get all that, but this team failed. And it's not like failed miserably. You didn't lose in the first round to Atlanta, or you didn't lose to Philly, but you got this far. And game 7, you would have asked for that home game. You can't protect home. And like you said, no adjustments. Malcolm Brogdon, those 7 minutes where he was minus 15, like he just protect him from himself. Like, Malcolm, you're not playing tonight.
Right.
Like, it's like Spo trying to throw Tyler Hero out there. Tyler probably could have, probably talked Spo into Spo knows. Hero, he's not playing in game 1 of the Hero's not playing until he's ready.
Yeah.
That's the Miami way. Okay. like you don't throw Brogdon out there when he has an elbow injury and a shooting arm, and defensively they're targeting him. And we could talk about him and his role in the next segment, but Brogdon's someone I think they're going to have to figure out what to do with him. And that was a ghastly stretch. As my colleague Adam Himmelsbach noted, they were up 3 points when they put Brogdon in for those 7 minutes, and he left. They were down 12. Like, that was a huge stretch. And this is a win or lose. Some of those times, your mistakes are in the first half. Like, Tatum kind of warmed up here and there. He had his moment. He had the dunk, and there was a play where he missed the layup that I think could have cut it to 8.
Yeah.
Or they're down 9, and it could have cut it to something like that. Like, opening of the fourth quarter, Tatum gets rim run, tries to lay it in pretty, misses.
I think it could have cut it to 6, actually.
Yeah, I think it was 8. Could have cut it to 6, and then was it Caleb Martin again? Or it might have been Jimmy. Jimmy takes one of those line drive threes, and I've seen him working on that shot. He can hit it. Like, I seen him before the game. Like, Jimmy he knows his limits, but he can hit that three. I'm not talking about he's Steph or nothing, but when he gets going, he gets that lift on his three because he's such a line drive shooter. He can hit that. And then it was an 11-point game, and you saw the Celtics were done. And to me, it's just the little things. And this is it's not huge things. It's just little things. The lack of adjustments, like you said, not adjusting when Tatum is obviously physically hobbled. Put him in the middle of that zone. Let him just pop a shot from the middle because you don't have anybody else to do it. Or tell Al Horford, hey, Al.
Look at the rim.
Look at the rim. You're damn near 7 feet. And I did my story today it's funny. So in Al's 4th year, when he made an all-star team in his 3rd year in Atlanta, so it took his 4th year. 99.5% of his shots were twos. He was a 2-point specialist. He did not take threes in Atlanta. This year, 32% of his shots this year were twos.
That's drastic.
Yes.
Drastic.
And then 27%, I believe, in the playoffs. Al had stopped being a post presence. Like, and Miami was like, no, beat us in the paint. And all Al, take that short 8-footer. And the Celtics didn't have, besides Tatum, didn't have anybody who could do that. And is that Joe? Is that not playing some of your guys? Not playing Hauser? Not playing, Peyton Pritchard for a little spark in the first half when it's obvious Brogdon is not himself? Use Peyton in those minutes. I don't know. This like if he goes down trying, Warren, I understand. Like, hey man, I tried everything. We just lost. Tip your cap. You're not in the finals. It's okay. But when you knew you could do more, and your stubbornness or this like we're just going to stick to the script, that's the frustrating part, I'm sure, for Celtics fans.
Well, this is a great time, I think, to take a break. We said we'd go short. We couldn't help ourselves. Eastern Conference had a lot to dive into, but we will take a quick break here. Our final, I guess, regular season or whatever you want to call this now, because we're definitely in the off season now here now. Our final Genome Time segment here for Believe in Celtics. We'll be right back here on the other side of this break here on Believe in Celtics. And on this week's edition of Genome Time here, I believe on Celtics, brought to you by Bet Online, it is time to assess the summer to come for Boston. First half of the show, we talked about the conference finals, lack of adjustments from Joe Mazzulla. And now we need to kind of dive into what's going to happen with this roster. Obviously, a lot of conversations burning on Twitter. Do you break up the Jays? They're going to cost you $500 million to kind of keep everything together. What do you do with Malcolm Brogdon? Gallinari's, I would assume, be back next year at some point. Can he actually contribute? Do you just run it back in that capacity? But let's kind of start where we finished, not to pick on Joe Mazzulla, but What are you hearing? Is there any stretch of the imagination that the Celtics would move on from Mazzulla? I think it might have been more likely had they got swept, but coming back into the series, they don't owe Udoka any more money now that he's obviously in Houston. But it would be a fourth coach in 4 years, and that could be the continuity, that the message that you don't want to send. Do you think Mazzulla did enough to at least retain his job? I'll go first, more or less, by saying, again, had they got swept, I think he might have been out of there. They have to, and you brought this up about 2 months ago, they have to bolster him, though. They have to give him some top level assistance. And I think if they do that, maybe the outcomes can be different for this team moving forward. And maybe some of that defiance that we saw him exhibit in the press conference and on the sidelines, maybe some of that will relax if he can have some assistants who've been there before to some degree and can give him some, I want to say pointers, but just some help, and some guidance and reading the game flow. Like, hey, we may need to look at this now, or this guy on the roster down on the bench, maybe it's time to give him a shot. That's my take on it. You're closer to it than I am, though, Gary. What's your sense of Joe Mazzulla being able to retain his job in Boston?
Yeah, Warren, I do think he'll stay. I think if they were going to, unless perhaps it's one of those situations where in some postseason meetings with him, he comes and says, this is how I want to do it. And maybe there's a difference of philosophy, like Nick Nurse in Toronto, where it was obvious management and the coach were not on the same page. And Toronto said, you know what, Nick, it's been nice. You led us to a title, but, we're going to get a coach who aligns more with us and what we're trying to do. And you can go. And now Nick's in Philadelphia. Unless there's a situation, I believe, where Mazzulla comes in and just says, listen, this is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I feel. And it's defiant and it's not aligned with management. I think he keeps his job. But I also think he's going to be on I don't like to use the word leash. I don't like to use that with humans in terms of being on a short leash, but just his
margin for error.
Yes, to be shorter.
Yeah.
Right. And, I thought, and the question is, and I'm sure Brad Stevens will be asked this about not adding to the staff in midseason when you lost David Stoudemire, not adding at the beginning of the season when you lost Will Hardy and you lost your damn head coach. 3 major guys that are on the staff last year were gone. Yeah. And you didn't do anything to replace them. At least put Allison Feaster on the bench. Now she might not want to do that, but she's got a bright basketball mind. I'm sure she could have offered suggestions too. Okay. You did nothing. You had Joe and whatever was left of Ime's staff. And as I reported today, many of them are headed for Houston to join their old friend Ime Udoka. So now you've got some real openings on the staff, probably 4 to 5. Okay. It's time to go old school, whether it be Sam Mitchell, whether it's somebody who knows the damn game. There's plenty of guys on television. There's plenty of guys who are scouting on other staffs that you can pull. Sam Cassell, hey, he's out there being on docs. There are some guys who are out there that you can pull in and would love to be assistant coach with the Celtics, love to work with Jayson and Jaylen. And perhaps if it doesn't work with Mazzulla, who can become the head coach. I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to revamp his staff. They're going to, and I don't know, and this is a relationship business. Warren, I don't know how many relationships Joe has with veteran coaches. I know he had one, I think Spoelstra said that they had gotten to know each other, but it's all built on relationships. So sometimes bringing in assistants is guys that you've worked with in previous stops. You were on the same staff. You might be still on the same staff in a college job. So anybody you probably bring in is not going to have a great relationship with Joe because they don't know him. They're going to have to make that work. And that's the thing. And that's where it can get kind of when you don't. Now, will they let Joe compile his own staff? And who is his staff going to be? That was my issue with Brad Stevens. Brad Robb is Butler buddies. Guys, who are good guys, but it's you don't have any old heads in the staff. You don't have any former NBA players in your staff. You don't have a guy that Tatum can look to and be like, okay, you played 12 years in this league. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
A guy who could be his big brother. I think they should bring a guy like Jerome Allen in Detroit, who's now bring him back. He's a very close relationship with, he left when Brad left because he wasn't going to be part of Ime's staff. Bring him back as one of your lead assistants. This is a guy who's very close to the Jays, right? Played in the league, is a big brother. They need a big brother. Unfortunately, Warren, Ime was like their uncle, and they respected that. He was like the old head. He was the dude you didn't step to. He was that uncle at the barbecue. You didn't. When he's talked, you listen.
Yes, sir.
You played dominoes. You didn't talk stuff to Unc. That was Ime. Joe was more of a big brother in a sense because it's hard to be 34 coaching 25 and 26-year-olds. Like there's a level of older, but not that older. And you didn't play in the league. You played high level D1. Great, good. Like Mazzulla's got that resume. Played at West Virginia, went to the Final Four, but that was it. So I think they have to revamp the coaching staff. And then I think that softens the job for Brad, who doesn't have to remove someone. Now, in case of ownership, if ownership felt like, I'm going to throw this out there, Warren. They felt like Doc Rivers wanted to come back. If Doc and Wick, now I know Doc didn't necessarily leave on the best terms in Boston. He didn't want to be part of a rebuilding plan. They didn't, it was kind of like, wow, Doc, the minute the big three get out of here, you just going to bail to LA and go golf and but let's say Doc. Now, let's say Wick says, you know what? And Doc says, man, I know what to do with those guys. And I'll hold the job for, he's 61. I'll hold the job for 3 or 4 years or 2 or 3 years, line my staff with some veterans and some young coaches. And then you guys, one of those guys will be ready to take over. And then you guys can have a coach for the next 10 to 15 years. Now, if Wick I think its ownership would make that decision. And let's say that was in place. Okay, Wick's like, you know what, I'm gonna eat the $14 million, and then you got to pay Doc and all that. But
for sure,
that would be an investment. But that would be because to me, Warren, here's the bottom line, and that's why, like in usual circumstances, I would not say you have to think about firing Mazzulla. But in this situation, when your championship window is now, okay, like it was supposed to be this year. If they faced Denver, it might have been even, but they might have been the favorites in the series, and they had home court advantage. Your championship window is right now. So next year, you have to think, you've got to get a chip out of Jayson and Jaylen. No more Eastern Conference Finals appearances, that's great. You went to the finals once. You need a coach that's going to take them there next year. Is that Joe? Will he elevate enough from year 1 to year 2 with a bolstered staff to do that? You have to be convinced that's the case. If not, you got to think about making a move and bringing a guy in who's not going to get out-coached by some of the top 5 or 10 coaches in the league, who's not going to be stubborn. And I don't care about me as a media member, but sell the organization more. Like Doc is a guy who you love. Everybody loves Doc. And Doc's a hustler. Not all of what Doc says is true. But damn it, Doc makes you feel like $1 million when you finish talking to him. Doc is a good guy in terms of like, he puts his hand on your shoulder. You feel, hey, start grinning. That's Doc. Joe is laser focused, scowl, the Belichick style. Now, when you won 6 Super Bowls, you can do that. You won 3 Super Bowls, you can do that. When you haven't won anything, you sort of have to sell the franchise. Now, does management look at his relationship with the media? And I'm not talking about me, but just how hard he is sometimes with some of the other media members too, the television host, Abby Shin, that, he's short. Do they look at that and go, you know what? That's not selling us.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what we want to see. Or they're like, you know what? That's him. He's a great, smart guy. It all depends on what they're looking for, Warren. And to me, I said something you got to think about, but you got to have a plan in place if you do that. You got to have a doc ready to come in. I don't think Monty Williams is going to be available much longer. I think he's about to go to Detroit. You got to have a guy who you know is ready to come in there, plug in and play. And if not, you keep Mazzulla, and I think they will do that and have him bolster his staff. I probably expect Brad Stevens tomorrow to say that they're going to keep him, because if he avoids the question, then we know something might be going on. And I don't know whose fault it was for not adding to the staff, but they got to make up for that, because that was a real mistake.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We'll go ahead and wish Joe Mazzulla the best, whatever that may look like here going into the off season. And let's talk a little bit more about what Brad's job has to do outside of bolstering the rest of the coaching staff. So the conversations obviously have been raised about Jaylen Brown and what the Celtics need to do with him, offering him that, super max. Listen, last impression here, game 7, 8 turnovers in a game where Tatum turns his ankle, wasn't able to step up to the proverbial plate. A lot of people who were really high on Jaylen have suddenly jumped off. What's your thought on Jaylen's mindset, the Celtics mindset, and how they feel about Jaylen himself? Is the stuff to Atlanta, or is he really kind of tired of being in the trade conversation? Is he going to try to get his bag first and then request a trade down the line? It's kind of what's your sense of the Jaylen Brown situation in Boston?
Yeah, Warren, I think he will come back. I think they'll re-sign him. But Jaylen's at a crossroads. Like, he's got to have a come to Jesus moment. Like, he was exposed in this series. And I just heard on it might have been Dan Pat or Rich Eisen's show, Caleb Martin saying the plan was always to force him to go left. Like, simple stuff. And when, just like last year, the Warriors are like, yep, Tatum, go left. You can't go left as strong as you go right. So when the scouting report is out on you like that, it's time for you to go radio silent, get into the lab, get over your depression. I get it. He's down. Motivate you. Be like Rocky, and before he fought Drago, go somewhere if you need to go overseas somewhere and hide out and get into a gym and get a coach or somebody, not one of your homeboys, and get to work. Work on your handle. Work on your free throw shooting. Work on all of what you feel like is your weakness, especially the fundamentals. Become, look to be a more pinpoint passer, because when you make second team All NBA and you bomb out in the biggest game of your life or one of them, people and NBA social media is going to come after you, and they're going to call you a fraud. They're going to say you're not that good. I think he's a good ball player. I've seen him grow over the years. Obviously, like, I followed him at Cal because I once upon a time I went to Cal, so I knew who he was the minute he arrived on campus, and we signed him. And we don't really sign many top 10 prospects. I don't know if you follow Cal sports, but this was a rare opportunity to sign a top 5 guy, top 10 guy. And so I've been following him ever since the day he committed, and he has improved his game vastly. But there's some holes. Being more consistent from the three-point line, being more consistent dribbler, being a better playmaker. This is what you go from good to elite. You want to be a top 10 player? You want to make $295 million over 5 years, $659 million a year? That's what you get into the lab. If I'm Jaylen, I'm not worried about the money. Like, I'm worried about improving my game. I'm more worried about my reputation as a player than I am, I got to get maxed. Like, because ownership points to, like, well, what about game 7, Jaylen? Like, what about when we needed you and you didn't come through? I'm not talking about, like, they're going to throw that in his face, but you should be more concerned about being a great player, and the money will be there. With this new television deal coming up, and I was talking with some colleagues just now, Amazon, NBC, Apple TV, damn near Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, everybody is going to be making a bid for the NBA. They're going to expand. The television contract is going to be about to be crazy. And this $59 million a year that Jaylen could make is going to be pretty normal in about 3 to 4 years. Remember when we were once upon a time, oh my God, he's making $20 million a year. Oh my God, this person's making 30. Now it's 40. I think the last year Dame's contract is 60 and right. So this is going to have to be the normal NBA, and I think people need to get off that number and understand that there'll be plenty of players behind him when Jayson makes 318 over 5, which is my math is $63.5 million or $6 million a year. So he'll be paid more and all that. So all these guys, Jokic and all these superstars are going to be coming along. Luka and all these guys are all going to be in the 300 million. And then I think probably Wembanyama might be the first $500 million player.
Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, so think about that. So that's coming. So we can't get caught up in numbers. So I do think they agree to a deal. I think he feels secure. And I think they say, Jaylen, we take care of you, that you take care of us. You get into that lab. And if you need a coach, we'll get you a coach. You need a ball handling coach. What is it that you need that we can get you to get to that next level? That's what I think should happen. Some strong, hard conversations of Jaylen, we don't need to show you the tape. We know you know, but this is what we'd like you for you to do. Give us a list of coaches and we can bring them on. Or if you got some peoples that you want to bring on, Isaiah Thomas, you want to bring on some guys who are magicians at handling the ball to show you some tips. And, you can hire, work, whatever. We'll take care of you. You take care of us.
Gary, before we move off of Jaylen, I just got to ask, is there a Godfather offer, that Brad Stevens wouldn't be able to refuse? I was tongue in cheek on another podcast the other day, actually yesterday, and having a conversation. I was like, I don't know if there's a guy out there, save Damian Lillard, that they could potentially make a move for even at this stage. Even Durant now with some of his words, I think that ship has passed. And obviously he's in Phoenix now, and no reason for Ishbia and company to make that move anyway. But then I see a report, I think, or at least an article by Kevin O'Connor saying the exact same thing. They should at least offer Brown for Damian Lillard. Is there a Godfather player out there that Stevens would, or do you think should at least consider, for Jaylen Brown?
That's an interesting question, Warren. I think now they're not saying they open to trade him, but I think Lillard's a guy like you're trying to win a chip. And the key to that trade would be the number 3 pick. If the Celtics are like, listen, we could get Dame, okay, who's got 3 to 4 more years of his prime left, maybe. If you maybe load manage him a little bit, don't play him 82. He can play till he's 34, 35. I think he's 32 now. And then with that number 3 pick, Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, one of the Thompson brothers. Is that a guy? And then suddenly you've got a potential cornerstone you could maybe pair with Jayson for years to come. I think that's something you have to think about. Now, I don't think it'll be that simple.
Yeah.
And I think Portland will want more back than just Jaylen if they're going to because that number 3 pick suddenly becomes very interesting because people are talking about Scoot Henderson as a really big time player. And then Brandon Miller, despite his troubles, you've seen him at Alabama. I've seen him. I mean, he got star written all over him.
Yep.
Now, if he keeps his head on straight and don't go jaw on us, he could be a real star. So that's interesting. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's supposed to be offering Jaylen to the highest bidder, but they have to think about how can we maximize our championship window next year. And to me, I don't think you trade Jaylen for that. I think personally, you upgrade the backcourt and you add, and I don't know who needs to go. We can talk about that. Add somebody who can get into the paint, distribute. Your fourth quarter offense is still a problem.
Yeah, Gary, let me tag in on that one right there too, because I think same thing. I was asked the question, and I was like, it's not a knock, not knocking Marcus Smart in any capacity, but there has to be somebody who can literally initiate and create offense for this team when you're just hanging out on the perimeter. Paint touches are a proven way to get better looks and then to draw defense in. And Boston just does not do enough of that. And that maybe goes back to a lot of maybe Mazzulla's schemes, so to speak. But one thing you talk about a team in the finals in Denver, there's going to be not just ball movement, but body movement, by those Nuggets players. And Boston hasn't been able to master that. So can they counteract maybe some of that by getting somebody who really can get into the teeth of the defense that is different from Marcus Smart? I'm not saying Marcus Smart has to go, but Derek White isn't that guy. Malcolm Brogdon apparently isn't that guy either, unfortunately. So you're right, though, because then now you would end up having a surplus of those guards. So not all of those guys can be there if you're bringing in somebody else, and I don't necessarily need to play Russian roulette with who has to go, but I think you're right that somebody who can actually dribble the basketball and create offense needs to come into this roster for them to have any type of sustainable success, especially when the offense gets stagnant as we've seen it, and maybe stop a run. Because like the mental state of when Boston kind of gets down, like to me, they are just this front running team. When things are good, and then they can ride high. But when it gets rough, they've had periods, and more recently here now, where it just goes off the rails. And I don't know what they need to do, even outside of like a point guard who can dribble, so to speak, or a guy who can dribble, point guard or otherwise, who can initiate offense. And then I think it's also about, is Al Horford, does his voice resonate enough, on the sidelines? I'm not knocking Al. I think Al's great. What are your thoughts on kind of some of those statements?
Yeah, Warren, I do think they need to restructure the backcourt, because I think this is what happened. Okay. They got Malcolm Brogdon thinking Malcolm was going to be that, calming influence in the fourth quarter. He was going to be able to dive into the paint, slash to the rim, get guys involved. We saw him do that in Indiana. We saw him do that in Milwaukee. But for whatever reason, he hasn't been that guy in Boston this year. He can get to the rim, not a great finisher. I mean, I can't tell you how many bunnies he missed, especially in the playoffs. Solid three-point shooter, very good three-point shooter. But Malcolm has been more just of a microwave kind of guy. Like, he is not running the offense with Marcus on the bench with 6 minutes left and an 8-point lead to secure the game. That just hasn't happened. And I think that's what they thought they were getting with Malcolm Brogdon. Now, I don't know if that's, well, you put me in a six-man role to score, so I'm a scorer. Or whether they don't think he can play point guard. And I think also, too, defensively, I think they thought Malcolm would be better. And he was being targeted, and he hasn't been better. Committing silly fouls. He had trouble against Harden. He had trouble early in the Miami series. So I think they need to figure out, like you said, I think they need somebody who can dive into the paint and will dish to Rob, dish to another big, maybe Al, or who can create on their own. And that's a hard to find. Chris Paul is 38 years old. Chris Paul ain't walking through that door.
Right.
But you need somebody who's a maestro. When you see him, he is controlling the pace. Marcus, as much as he tries, I think he does some very good things for this team. He's had a good, solid 8 years in Boston. Or now 9. I think it was a 14 draft. He has his limitations. He's never going to be an elite shooter. He's not going to make a jump, a 17, 18-footer off the pick and roll. That's not his game. And he has worked on his post-up game at times, but that doesn't always, then there's the questionable decision-making at critical times.
Yeah.
To me, there was that step-back three that he took in the first half as a dagger shot or a hero ball that, Marcus, what are you doing? Some of these alley-oops, some of the decision-making is not of a premium point guard. So how do you get one in? What do? Do you Malcolm has 2 more years left on his deal at $21 million. Marcus, I think, has 3 more years left on his deal. So I think Derek White's safe. I think he's shown that he can really help those guys in defensively, as a scoring spark, getting to the rim, hitting that floater. But they need somebody with some speed. They need somebody, and I don't know, like, do they got the kid, the two-way guy, J.D. Davidson. Now, I'm not saying, start him. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But they're tutoring him to be kind of a point who can hit the three, who can get into the paint. He's fast as all get out. Like, do they work to develop him into like maybe a backup role? If Peyton is gone, and do they give him an expanded role because now he was on a two-way? Do they bring him back to what do they have in mind for him? So I do think they need to restructure the backcourt, Warren, because I just think White and Brogdon kind of duplicate each other, and they don't have a person. Because remember, like, they blew game 2 because their offense broke down in the fourth quarter, and they almost blew game 6. Like, it's continuously, this can't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Like, they blew game 3 of the finals, same way. Like, the game 4 when you had a chance to go up 3-1. And to me, I think they can't keep saying, okay, Marcus. I think Marcus is proven, but I think they can change his role a little bit, whether it's bring him off the bench, whether it's making him a 2-guard, kind of a hybrid. But the whole thing of like you said, like, you don't run any pick and rolls with Tatum. Like, just think of a guard who could run a pick and roll with Tatum and then, and then hit that open 16-footer like it's easy. They don't have that. That's not Marcus's game. That's not Malcolm's game. So what do? You got to get somebody to do that.
I'm really interested in that, and before we close out, we'll touch a little bit more on some of the guys that who may seem to be unhappy with this roster, right, or with their role, so to speak. So I don't know where Blake is. Obviously, Blake's at the end of his career, and he might, just be content to return or go seek a championship somewhere else if he can kind of get on there. Don't know how he feels about not really being in the playoff rotation at all. But you mentioned Peyton Pritchard, and we obviously know the situation of Grant Williams is also looming. Williams had some nice moments, within the playoffs when he got consistent run. I'm not mad at him for, going at Jimmy Butler in game 2 and whatever. And, the proverbial poke the bear type stuff. I'm not really buying into that. I think Grant did what he needed to do, and he needed to provide some spark, for that Celtics team. But are those the pieces? Are those the chips that maybe flesh some things out? Because I know what I'm saying. Gallo cannot play the defense that Grant does. But at the end of the day, if you need to move Grant, Gallo can at least take those minutes, I guess, so to speak, right? And does it allow you some sort of package with Williams and Pritchard to maybe get that play creator in some capacity that can help this team when times get rough? But what's your sense of those two players specifically and their roles? And do you think they'll be back with this team? Or again, it's time for them to move on to try to figure out some other ways to play?
Yeah, I think if you mean Peyton is going to probably be non-tendered. Like, I don't know if it's Joe, Brad, I don't know. Like, ever since when Ime got there, remember the first year Peyton, the last year Brad, Peyton had a role. Like, he looked like he was going to really help this team and become a reliable complement. And then once Ime got there, that all stopped. So it's been 2 years now. Peyton feels like, and Peyton's not a young guy. He's a 4-year college guy. So Peyton's on 25, I want to say. So he's like, 25. So he's trying to, get paid, figure out a place to call home. He don't want to be out of the league. So I think he wants to move on. He told me he wished he would have gotten traded at the deadline. He was hoping to get traded. And I think, when that didn't happen, Blake Griffin, who was one of his close friends of the team, said, hey, man, that's the league business. Be professional. Play this out. Do your best. and you'll find another home or whatever. Somebody will covet you because you're playing for 29 other teams too. They're looking at you too. So I think Peyton's gone. Grant, all depends on what he's asking for, what he'll agree to. If a team comes out the blue and makes him a 4-year, $60 million offer, what do you have in Grant? I think Grant at his best is an NBA starter, like a fourth guy, like a guy who, is going to just do the dirty work for you, hit the three, defend. I think he's good with that. But do the Celtics see that out of him, or is he going to continue to get jerked around with his playing time all year? I don't think he looks forward to that. And you don't pay a guy 12, 13, 14 million to do that. Or he could return next year without a contract. Sorry, in the final year of his deal, and then be unrestricted.
Right.
In the summer of 24. That might be an option where, okay, Grant, like, we don't owe you anything. Play your ass off for us, and, set your market to where you can get that 5-year, $75 million deal you think you're worthy of. So I think there's some options of him returning. I also think there's some options of him. I don't think they'd give him away or whatever, non-tender him or whatever. But I do think with the right price, I think they bring him back.
Okay. So you think Peyton gets non-tendered, no qualifying offer. Grant at least gets a qualifying offer, and then you see where the chips fall, where they may from there. Whew, Gary, it's been great. It's been rough. I think, seeing it end this way, but, kudos to you and the great coverage you will be able to provide throughout the entirety of the season and into the playoffs. And now, unlike the Celtics, you're still covering the finals. You'll still be at the finals. So your job is not done. But as I say in Game of Thrones, the Celtics watch has ended. Their season is now over. And the offseason is here to come. And we'll see what Brad Stevens and company is able to do. That'll wrap it up here for Believe in Celtics, brought to you by Bet Online. Again, he is the great Gary Washburn. Stay tuned to his finals coverage. Follow him on Twitter at GWashburnGlobe. Again, I am Warren Shaw. Follow me at Shaw Sports NBA on Twitter. And that'll do it for this iteration of Believe in Celtics. We might be back here at some point, during the draft, going into summer league and free agency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we want to thank you for rocking with us throughout the course of the regular season and the playoffs. Again, catch up with y'all next time.